Everyone, I'm going to call this meeting of the Oxford County Library Board to order. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the agenda as printed?
Moved by Mayberry.
Seconded by me.
That's Regina.
Yes.
Thank you. Any issues with the agenda? Anybody want to shuffle anything around or anything? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None. That's carried. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? I'm just going to wait a minute to be sure I'm not seeing anybody. I just want to make sure there's no lags in anybody's video or any mics that are accidentally muted. But I'm not seeing any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Adoption of board minutes of previous meeting. Can I have a mover to adopt the minutes of the April 20th Oxford County Library Board meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Martin, seconded by Mayberry. Issues with the minutes from that meeting? No, all those in favor? Opposed? None, that's carried. Delegations and presentations, we have none. Therefore, no consideration of delegations and presentations. Consideration of correspondence. Can I have a mover that the correspondence from David Harvey be received?
So moved.
Moved by Martin.
Seconded by Mayberry.
Seconded by Mayberry. And Lisa, would you like to speak to that at all before I call the vote?
Yes, please. I'd just like to give you some background to it. Earlier this year, the Federation of Ontario Public Libraries, or FOPL, of which Woodstock Public Library is a member, we are not, encouraged its members to undertake an advocacy effort for the maintenance or increase of the public library's operating grant, which is provided through the ministry. At that time, there was fear in the library community that the funding might be decreased. The funding was cut by 50% back in the 1990s and hasn't ever regained its level of funding. But since this resolution was passed, the province has let SOLS know, Southern Ontario Library Services, they intend to maintain the PLOG at the 2019 levels and that we'll receive the funding earlier this year. Normally, we don't receive it until November or December. So this resolution is for your information.
Great. Any questions for Lisa on that correspondence? So I will just say that I believe this exact correspondence was received at Oxford County Council as well. So I think, you know, if we just want to receive it, I can call the vote. If people want to do anything more with it, this would be the time to suggest that. But not hearing anyone, I'm going to call the vote to receipt that the correspondence from David Harvey be received. All those in favor? Opposed? None. That is carried. 8.1 reports on statistics. Recommendation that the statistics for the 4 months ending April 30th, 2020 be accepted. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that?
Mayberry. Move it.
Moved by Mayberry.
Regina seconded.
Seconded by Regina. And Lisa, do you want to speak to that before I ask the board for comments and questions?
Certainly, I can speak briefly on the attendance statistics and the circulation statistics. I don't think it's going to be a surprise for any of us that we've missed out on a lot of attendance and programming opportunities with the closures effective March 13th. Normally, March break is one of our busiest times, so we don't have the attendance or programming stats there. we will be starting to track stats once again now that curbside is getting underway. You might have wondered why there was any material circulation registered in April, so I thought I might be able to provide some explanation for that. Some would be renewals, people calling or emailing the branches asking to have books that they had out renewed. Some would be home deliveries, because earlier on there were people whose holds were sitting in the branches and staff had arranged to get them to them, or our library driver was delivering them out to their homes. So that accounts for it, the delivery of pre-existing holds and some renewals. As for computer usage, it's interesting to track the wireless usage. We'll definitely see next month whether there's any jump because of the TV-DSB partnership. But otherwise, not surprisingly, wireless is down in most branches because most of the wireless usage is within the branch, people bringing their own devices in. Some branches, it's been really good, the wireless. Burgessville, Norwich, Otterville, Tavistock, Thamesford. I suspect that's because they've got a good sidewalk presence and people are aware that the wireless is available. Interkip was a little surprising because it's somewhat remote, but I think it's a good opportunity maybe for us to find ways that we can better advertise our free Wi-Fi moving forward. So those are my comments.
Any questions or comments for Lisa on the statistics report?
Barry here if I can. Lisa, just under circulation, I get your explanation as to why. I'm just curious, when you look at the circulation numbers compared to last year, and I'm looking at a couple of them. One is Brownsville, where we got 66 as compared to 240, so 28%. And then you go to Embro, and it's like 6 as compared to 600. And that's 1%. And it's sort of, boy, it's a huge range. I'm just wondering, like, what attributes for that? Like, I expected it all to be, 90% down. But there's a huge range in there.
Lisa?
My apologies. It is, you're right, it can be a little puzzling, but again, I think it might be certain Brownsville patrons were more proactive in getting books renewed, which they can do online. So it depends on who's going into their account on a regular basis and doing that, and which branches enjoyed the most home delivery, depending on which holds had been made available prior to the closures.
If I can have a follow-up, does that indicate that some branches have done a better job of proactively encouraging something, i.e. renewals or whatever, than others? Like, is it a variety in the message or the level of delivery of the message, or just a variety in the uptake of the message?
I don't think you can attribute it to some doing a better job. Branch staff were pretty much all encouraged, and they took the opportunity to go into their branches even after it was closed and look at those hold shelves and contact those patrons. It could just be that at that point there were fewer holds already made available in certain branches.
Anybody else have any questions for Lisa on that report? One from me then, Lisa, very, very general one. I guess there's two ways this could sort of cut, I think. We're in, as we know, we're in like uncharted times now. We were already, struggling. What does the library of the future look like in Oxford County? How do we deliver that? And then all of a sudden it was dumped on us like overnight, almost literally. What does it look like? So do we think, given that these numbers, we have no frame of reference for the last time there was a global pandemic, this is how we delivered library services and how it worked and what didn't work. But nevertheless, there's great data here. Do we see an increased role for this kind of data analysis? I'm going a little bit further here as to some of the other reports that are in. There seems to be some good insights here into some of the programming that later on that might be driving some of these numbers to try and, again, it's difficult without a frame of reference, but at the same time, we've got data that says this is what people are wanting and what they are and aren't using. Is there an opportunity to use this data as a tool as the libraries reopen to fine tune what each branch does offer? Again, assuming that some stuff will work in certain branches and not with other branches.
Mhm. For sure, I think that there is going to be a lot more emphasis placed on extracting data, because that's really all we're going to have over the next little while. There's already been some webinars offered through different software services, including our own, trying to help us discover ways to mine a little deeper with our data. I know there's going to be a lot of consultation between library branches as how do we get the information we need. We'll all be learning this together. So yeah, simply, yes, I think that we will be having to really dig deep in order to demonstrate the role of the library moving forward.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on, sorry, here, just finding on my agenda where we were at on item 8.21. Any other comments or questions for Lisa on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, none, that is carried. And that was 8.1.1, correct, Lisa?
Yes, yes.
And now librarians report 8.2. I need a mover and a seconder that the board receive report number 2020-03 for information and discussion purposes. Can I have a mover and a seconder?
Moved by Mayberry.
Seconded by Laura.
Thank you. And Lisa, do you want to highlight anything in your report for the board before I ask them for comments and questions?
Sure, just a couple of things. First off, I'd say how relieved we are to have a year's extension for the reaccreditation process. I anticipated that would be the case, but it does help to take the pressure off quite a bit. And I also want to acknowledge the help that the county IT staff gave us in setting up the Wi-Fi project in partnership with the Thames Valley District School Board. The invitation to join with them was fairly last minute, and with IT's help, we were able to jump on it right away. I think that that's a great opportunity to help students who are experiencing difficulties in accessing high-speed internet or any internet in order to get their schoolwork done. And like I mentioned with the Wi-Fi stats, I think it's a great opportunity for us to be able to promote the fact that we have Wi-Fi availability at all our branches. And just some general comments about our virtual services. Christina is on the line today, so I've invited her to step in whenever she wants to. But as expected, we've seen a very significant increase in use of our electronic downloads, and our virtual programming has been something that sort of started up out of necessity, but has really taken on a bit of a life of its own. We're really pleased with the energy and the creativity that staff have brought to putting together these. There's pretty much content being offered every weekday, and the response has been good. I think it's been great to keep families engaged with their familiar library staff when they can't see us in person.
Comments or questions for Lisa on the librarian's report?
Thanks, Lisa. I just wanted to mention I was really surprised at how many people were really tuning in for some of those story times. That's amazing that they were, allowing that. I mean, giving them out, but the numbers were really surprising to me.
I think when you're talking social media, we've got our core group of people who look for this, but then they've got friends, and we saw a lot of likes, a lot of shares. And so a lot of people, the friends and family of people and neighbors, and word spread pretty quickly. Our social media has a good reach, so the advertising for those programs is pretty good.
That's fantastic, yes.
Anyone else with comments or questions for Lisa on that report? Mayberry here. I'm just curious around the, excuse me, Valley initiative. if in fact students have to come to the library to get Wi-Fi, then there's a bit of an issue around social distancing or physical distancing, I guess, probably social distancing as well. But it also requires that they get to the library, right? So while it's a good, like it's a way to help, it's not a solution to a problem, like, or not the solution to a problem, or maybe even the best one. So I'm just wondering, the other thing is, what day did we start? Because we haven't seen an uptake in wireless use at the libraries as compared to normal. Like, so this isn't, I'm not sure how widespread the value is. And while I fully support us being wireless hotspots always, like not just now, but all the time, I just wonder, do you think we'll get much uptake on it, or is that something that we'll see in the May statistics?
It would be something we'll see in the May statistics. The service didn't start until probably the second week of May, if I'm correct. So it hasn't really been that long.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Lisa, one from me then on that. Do we have, I guess, a double-barreled question? Do we have adequate Wi-Fi and internet speeds at each branch? And two, do we have equitable, so between each branch, so that if people rock up to, I'll say Harrington because it's the closest one to me and it's one of the more rural library branches. If people rock up to Harrington to submit, their project and it's a video for their teacher or something like that, are they going to be able to, download the appropriate materials from their teacher and upload, potentially high volume data, the same as they would at any other, say urban branch of OCL?
I believe that oh, sorry, Lynn, was that Lynn? I know that IT is monitoring the Wi-Fi speed at each location on a daily basis. Unless there was a great deal of demand being placed on the bandwidth at that given time, they should be able to. It depends on how much streaming they're doing. But I think for these students' needs right now, just downloading or uploading assignments, I shouldn't anticipate there'd be any issues. But whether or not we do have enough, I think we'll find that out. Right now, I believe we do. There's upload and download issues depending on what you're doing. The download is usually really good, but considering that these people outside the buildings are going to be the only users of the Wi-Fi, I anticipate it will be really good. But Cisco, who's working with the TVDSB, has been talking with Mike and has said that they're willing to work with us if we need to revisit our Wi-Fi speeds.
So I guess as a follow-up, to me, so thank you, first of all. I mean, to know that it's being monitored and that we have a way to measure as people do start to take it up and use it, is it working or not? Because if it's working, then why, then we don't need to invest in something that costs more. But I guess two parts then as a follow-up. One, there's the internet speed part, but the other part is the Wi-Fi. Is the Wi-Fi signal strong enough, given that people are going to be accessing it outside the building by definition for now? Is the Wi-Fi signal strong enough for people, say, parked in a car or sitting on a bench outside, that they're always going to be able to access it, or they're going to have to go and lean over against the window or the wall to try and get the signal, kind of thing? Are we able to figure that out too? I'm trying to think through the real world experiences of a student, again, rocking up to the library and saying, okay, I'm going to do this, and then saying, oh, I've been here for an hour and I can't upload, or I can upload, but I've got to stand in this corner and hold my phone up over my head, or whatever the case may be. I don't know what the solutions to those would be, but the first thing would be, do we know that they're even an issue?
We told every staff person, the branch staff, that this was going to be happening and that they are going to be probably just aware of the fact that there could be greater traffic outside the branches even when they're not there. But they do tell us anecdotally that they do often see cars just parked out in the parking lots of the branches, sitting there for possibly half an hour and doing whatever they want to be doing with the Wi-Fi. So we do believe that they are successfully accessing it. It depends. It's a branch by branch, facility by facility thing. Some may have to get out of their cars and sit beside the building. I really don't know. We'll have to see how it goes.
Okay. because I would hope that if we're going to offer this, I mean, in particular in these times for students trying to submit projects, but in general, I think this is going to be. I mean, we've talked about this before, pre-COVID, and library of the future context. But I think this is going to be something that probably will be more and more the case, that people will want to sit now that there's good weather. Maybe they won't want to sit in the bench in the sun, but they want to sit in the bench in the shade, and utilize the Wi-Fi library, the library Wi-Fi. So. Yeah, is there any chance that we could get reports at subsequent library meetings about either the subjective observations of staff or from IT saying are we or aren't we still below the capacity of our Wi-Fi and our internet, so that we know if we have a particular branch, for instance, that's seeing immense data upload and download, that we need to do something to facilitate that happening, or at least consider doing something to make that happen.
Yeah. I can certainly talk to them about that, what we can gather. Generally speaking, Wi-Fi stats are not delineated as to who's accessing it for what reason, but we can look into certainly following trends if we see spikes in usage.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for Lisa on this report? I was particularly disappointed to see story time with Luke and Zora Mayer Marcus Ryan was like relatively low on the views, but I'm going to blame that on Luke, and that we were one of the first ones. In all seriousness, though, I have to say, Lisa, like, it is fantastic to see how much that has taken off, and staff did a tremendous job in, like, so quickly. I can't remember when I did that with Luke, but I mean, it was within days of the library being closed that they were like, let's do something new. What can we do? Let's do this. And when I showed up to do that video with him, it was so slick. They were so prepared. I told them, I went in there in between two meetings. I had like 15 minutes or something. And both the two setups that I did 2 videos with them in about 15 minutes, and they were so ready to go. And you can see that they've just gone on to success after success with this. People are loving it and taking it up, and hopefully it'll convert into, people watching story time with Gail and Luke, and convert into them taking out a book electronically or otherwise in the future. I really think there's a huge opportunity here for traction, and to get hopefully some new people aware through these videos of what's available at the library. And I have to say, an excellent staff that's taking the initiative to do these things.
Yeah, we had a conversation this morning, a few of us, about this exact thing, and we figure once we have curbside kind of under our belt, we think it's time to sit down and really talk about where are we going with virtual programming, and look at it in a more structured way.
I think, there's a real lesson for us to be learned here as a rural library service, or largely rural library service, that while we all lament the loss of newspapers and TV news coverage of our issues in rural Ontario, in a lot of ways social media allows us to tell our own stories to each other. And so what library staff are doing is really filling that void. And I think we're seeing here that there's a large audience for people who are like, I'm not necessarily going to get in the car and drive to the library on a Tuesday afternoon, but if there's going to be story time on Tuesday afternoon, I'll click in and watch that story time with my kids. And so I think there's huge opportunity for this, obviously during COVID, but potentially coming out of it as well, to promote library services. Not only the virtual ones, but the physical ones when we're back to that. Is there any other questions for Lisa on this report before I call a question?
Just one quick comment, Mr. Chair. Perhaps the next time we're doing story time, you could not read the Zora Council agenda, because it really isn't that interesting. At least that's what I hear.
Well, it's not always a bad thing to have an uninteresting council agenda, though, David, right? I'll take that under advisement. Having heard David's extremely discerning comments, does anybody else have any other questions? In favor? Opposed? None. That's carried. So then we are at item 8.3. 2020-04 board member appointment to Souls Trustee Council, Southern Ontario Library Service. Recommendation that the board appoint member blank to represent Oxford County Library Board on the Southern Ontario Library Service Trustee Council. I need a mover and a seconder to fill in that blank.
Chair, I'm happy to move it. I just need a name to put in there, and since it's not going to be mine, I'm just wondering who would like their name put in there.
So assuming everybody's read Lisa's report and you know what the scope of Saul's work is and how it's how the meetings are conducted twice a year and right now virtually. I guess Lisa, is there anything you want to highlight about that position before somebody hopefully volunteers themselves?
Well, it's always been 2 meetings a year, one in the spring and one in the fall. Obviously, this year they're going to be held virtually. The trustee council representatives from previous years have certainly always enjoyed it. It's been a good opportunity to get together and hear from other library systems. It's a fairly wide region. The trustee council one takes in from Essex, Windsor, Elgin, Chatham, Brantford, Brant, St. Thomas, Woodstock, Middlesex, Norfolk. So it's a really good chunk of libraries from this area. So it's a great learning opportunity and good discussions. And generally after the Souls Trustee Council meeting, the representative comes back to the board meeting with a brief report.
If I may, I'm just wondering if either Laura or Regina would be interested in taking that on. It is an educational opportunity for sure. So.
Yeah, I would be interested in doing that. I'm just waiting. I'm glad Lisa gave a little more, background to it. But as a newbie, I'd be interested in taking it.
Hence, my motion says Regina Smith be the Souls rep. If you can get a seconder.
I will second that, Laura. Thank you.
And Regina, I'm assuming for comments that you're willing to accept that nomination.
Yes, I am.
Does anybody else have anything they want to say on this or questions before I call the question? So then I have moved by Mayberry, seconded by Langford, that the board appoint member Regina Smith to represent Oxford County Library Board on the Southern Ontario Library Service Trustee Council. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? No, thank you. Opposed? None. That motion is carried. So thank you and congratulations, Regina.
Oh, thank you very much.
And Lisa, I assume you'll work with Regina on getting her connected for that with the necessary connections and correspondence and agendas and to prepare her for that meeting. I think we might have lost Lisa there.
I can be in touch with her and find out exactly what I have to do. That's no problem. Yes.
Thank you. All right then, 8.4. I'm slightly hesitant to move on without Lisa here. It looks like her internet connection is. Oh, maybe she's coming back. Are you there, Lisa? Are you able to tell if Lisa is connected or not? Ah, there she is. You can hear us, Lisa? Yeah, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Lisa. No. Yeah.
It does actually, though, raise the issue that perhaps thinking forward and all that, learning to read lips might be a skill set that would be desirable by board members. And Laura hasn't offered for anything yet, but she might take us up on that opportunity and learn and teach us at the next board meeting.
It won't work when we all start wearing masks, though. I'm just going to wait a minute. I'll ask all of you for a bit of patience here, and trying to keep track of the movers and seconders and votes, and obviously needs to speak to some of these reports. So I just want to make sure she's all connected there.
So, Mr. Chair, I would just caution that you want to be careful that you don't prejudge Laura's ability to lip read through a mask. You know, some people are amazingly talented. So just, you want to be careful, that's all.
All
You
right.
never know.
Lisa, we can't hear you, but we can see you. It's ironic that the one person with maximum IT support.
Maybe I should come in and help, you think?
Larry, you stay right where you are.
It's just a suggestion.
I'm back. I'm back, sorry.
That's all right. All right, we are on now then to item 8.4, 2020-05 COVID-19 Pandemic Recovery Action Plan. Recommendation, we need a mover and a seconder that report number 2020-05 entitled COVID-19 Pandemic Recovery Action Plan be received for information.
So moved.
Moved by Martin,
I'll second it, Regina.
seconded by Smith. And Lisa, do you want to speak to that at all before I open it up for comments and questions from the board?
Sure. I will just briefly just comment that we've built this pandemic recovery action plan based on a few assumptions. Basically that it's going to be an incremental return to full library service without a doubt. That we've got to be extremely flexible because timelines aren't known. And of course, there's always the possibility of a second wave or a future pandemic. So we have to remain very nimble in how we operate libraries from here on in. We anticipate a very busy first few weeks. We're already hearing it this week as people learn that curbside's come available. So we're going to be opening in Ingersoll and Tillsonburg this week on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, monitoring it very closely each day, then getting together on Monday to talk about it and tweak it if needed, and in order to be able to advise Norwich, Chelmsford, and Tavistock how to proceed the following week. So the plan, it's thorough. We focused on phase one, the curbside delivery, but right away we'll be moving on to phase two and phase three, how we envision that working, because we know that it could be very short notice from the province. Knowing, though, that safety is paramount, and we will not move from phase to phase until we're sure we're 100% ready.
So any comments or questions for Lisa on the report?
Just one question, if I could, Marcus. I think that was in this report where I read, Lisa, that you're going to operate for 1 week and then assess it. Do you think 1 week is sufficient enough time to sit down and actually have a real honest assessment of whether it's going to take off or whatever? I mean, I look to your expertise. You deal with it. I don't, so.
Well, no, I think you're right. 1 week only to make any real quick changes that need to be done. We've only planned for, 12 hours a week for curbside service at each location. That may not be enough. We're really going to have to see. But in order to talk to Norwich, Chelmsford, and Tavistock and say, this is what's working, this is what isn't, we want to make sure that we're able to make the changes we need to make on a quick basis. But yeah, I mean, we're going to be assessing it for the long term too. I'm sure that we may end up over time having to increase the hours.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Maybe right here, I'm just curious how we're going to communicate, because as Lisa just indicated, this is going to be a continually evolving plan. And as we, weekly assess what we did in the past week, how we can improve in that, the public needs to know, yes, these are the new rules, the hours have changed or they've been expanded or whatever. I'm just wondering how we're going to communicate that. Is it just by social media? Or is there another way that we can address that so that people know better, and whether that be signage outside the library or street side, sort of signage, I'm not sure. But I think we also need to tell people, not that we're back, but we're getting closer. So I think there's a couple of things. I'm just wondering, is there room in the, and if there isn't, then we need to adjust it. Is there room in the advertising budget, et cetera, to engage the public and to keep them fully informed so that they can take full advantage of the offerings that we have or that we are able to provide. The other comment, and this will be just a quick comment, the phased approach, which probably reflects fairly closely what we anticipate, and again, it's a real anticipation that the province is going to do, appears to be well done. I think it's in my mind, as I read through and check off the check marks and all that, it sort of seems to be systematic and all that. So I think it's well done. But I do think it's one of those things that could change on a, sort of overnight. And we need to be able to communicate that change rapidly, sort of on the fly all the time. So I just wonder how we're getting to that communications part.
I can say that a media release has gone out today, which is going to talk about curbside service starting. I think one of the things that gives us some control over this is pickup for holds only. So people are not just walking up to curbside service and asking for books. And for these people to know that their holds are available for pickup, they've either received an email or a phone call from staff. And during those phone calls in particular, they're the whole process, they're being walked through the process. So you get your email that your hold is ready, you're going to be given instructions as to how you get that. Luke was saying today that I think 80% of the hold notifications right now are going out by email. Only 20% are requiring a phone call. That's because about 80% of our customers have given us their email. So we do have quick ways of getting in touch with them. And they're going to be coming to us after we've contacted them. So there's that opportunity for communication.
So that's the hold up, or the holds now. I'm wondering, how do we engage the community that hasn't been engaged yet, the ones that are just waiting for the library to open, to say to them, yeah, we don't really have to be open for you to pick up that next book. So we are kind of half open, or will be. I just wonder how we're going to get that so that the large percentage of card holders that aren't going to or haven't placed holds know that they can.
We've tried to promote the Reader's Advisory Team and have encouraged people to contact staff for book recommendations, for ideas of what they could be reading, and we can place their holds for them. But at this point, until people can access the bookshelves again, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime in the foreseeable future, we are going to be holds driven. Now, having said that, at curbside, it's possible to have a small display of like our quick picks, our bestsellers, within eyesight, and the person can point at something and say, I'd like that, and we can give it to them. But in terms of being able to access the browsing collections, we can't do that. But we can promote our Reader's Advisory.
Anyone else? I guess as a follow-up to that, Lisa, I think in your report it did talk about, and I'm not sure exactly what stage this is at, but it did talk about sandwich board signage for in front of branches and stuff. So that could be some of it. And I think, in terms of the press release that went out, certainly I think Heart FM in particular, but Sentinel Review as well, have been very good about handling all municipal press releases and sharing it widely. So that's another way. And as we saw from your earlier report, there is a large amount of social media reach, probably more now than there was before. And I think the other thing about the social media reach is that you don't necessarily need to be on social media for it to reach you. you know, a friend or a family member is on social media and will tell you those things. So, absolutely encourage you to keep doing all of those things. And I think that was all I had on that one. Anybody else have anything on this recovery plan report?
The only comment I have that I'm glad to see they're taking their time and not rushing into it. And I'm maybe diverting here a bit, but right now I am more concerned about the spread now than I was 3 weeks ago because they're starting to open things up and people just aren't thinking, that's all. So I'm glad to see that we're taking a slow, methodical approach and hopefully we can carry on one step at a time. And congratulations to Lisa and the staff.
Yeah, and that was really, you know, what I was going to end on, Larry, was related to that, and that is that, you know, I'm sure staff, Lisa and staff, are going to be reviewing this, you know, at least weekly in reality once it starts to happen, because once it starts, then it will start to change in ways that we can't anticipate, because again, none of us have been through this before. So you guys are going to start with I think what you've heard from the board, everybody seems to think this is a very robust plan, well thought out. But the one thing we've all learned over the last 9 weeks is no matter how well we think we've thought this stuff out, as soon as you start to do it, it doesn't turn out the way you thought it was, because no one's been through it. Not just the board and staff, but none of the patrons of the library have been through it before either. So they're going to show up and say, now that I use the library this way, now I would actually also like or not like this or that, and we aren't going to know until it starts. So, and of course, all these things are, you know, this is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to work until it changes. And again, you know, we've all seen it. I think as our parks opened up municipally last week, that, you know, some people are struggling with how to follow, and library staff are certainly going to have to adapt as that happens. And of course, the ultimate one will be if the province changes the emergency orders, then that changes the reopening plan for the library, obviously. But I think you've heard from the board that it's a good plan, and the board has confidence in it, Lisa. So just, you know, as Larry said, thanks to you and staff for coming up with this plan. Again, it can't be emphasized enough that in this case, there's no playbook to compare to. Every library in Ontario and in Canada is going through the same thing right now. There's nowhere to look and say, well, what did they do when they went through this? Everybody's looking over everybody else's shoulder. So thank you for coming up with this plan. And please, you know, just reemphasize to staff that it's not going to work. And that's not their fault. It's not going to work because nothing's going to work right now. It's just the way that it is. And as long as they're, you know, meeting to discuss it and adapt the plan as we go, I really do think that most residents are very understanding that we're all trying to figure it out and adapt every hour of every day, because we're all doing it in our personal lives as well as staff trying to do it at the library. So thanks for this. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions before I call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? None. That is carried. 8.5. 2020-06 COVID-19 library services impacts, April 2020 recommendation. I'm going to need a mover and a seconder that report number 2020-06 entitled COVID-19 library services impacts, April 2020 be received for information. Can I have a mover and a seconder?
Moved by Maybury.
So moved.
Moved by Maybury, seconded by Martin. Lisa, do you want to highlight anything in this report for us?
I can. Lynn is the author of the report.
Sorry. I apologize. Lynn, do you want to highlight anything for us in this report?
Certainly. This, I think, is something that the board had asked for the last time we met. It helps summarize the impacts of COVID-19 on the county's library services, including variances from the budget and the business plan. Also provides service level impacts and mitigation efforts. So attempts that staff are taking to reduce the exposure to financial loss and retention of everyone's safety, and as well as providing innovative services to the public. So if you want, I can just walk you through the report briefly and then open the floor for questions. If that
Your mic is really cutting out, Lynn. I don't know if between you and Matt, is there anything that can be done? I heard most of what you said. I'm assuming that it was the same for everybody. I heard most of it, but every once in a while the volume just almost entirely went away.
Okay, so I'm going to try this. Does this sound any better?
It does.
Okay, so let's go with this then.
All right.
So starting with the operational service impacts section, so that's just a bit of an overview in terms of how the services have been impacted since COVID-19 began. And much of that was also referenced in Lisa's report, so we won't go through that in too much detail. But again, I have to echo some of the comments made here this afternoon and how agile and innovative Lisa's team have been. It's just amazing how excited they are to serve the public in the best way they can in spite of all of these restrictions, and they've done an amazing job. So you can see there the second section there is staffing. So this is how COVID-19 has impacted our staffing levels. So you can see in the top right-hand corner of this section that the budget FTE was set for 35.4, and that includes any summer students that we would have hired as well. Then you can see in the chart there current staffing levels. So we've got 16 FTEs that are in active and productive work, although their hours have been reduced in some instances, most instances in fact. We have 3 FTEs that have been redeployed, 2 to emergency services and 2 staff to Woodingford Lodge. And we have 10.6 FTEs that are on unpaid leave, and that's through the declared emergency leave. So they will be receiving unemployment insurance benefits on that program as well. So the reason that the FTEs don't add up to the approved FTEs under the budget is simply because we've reduced the hours that a lot of those staff are working through this situation. And some of those hours and some of those staff will be reinstated as we start introducing a new level of service to the public. Now, in terms of the key performance indicators, and I think this goes back to your earlier question or comment, Councillor Ryan, with respect to, how are we monitoring the data and what are we doing with it? So I just wanted to let you know that this is an attempt these are the same indicators that were in the business plan for 2020. And so you can see the 2020 budget indicators are there. And then Lisa has made, based on information gathered to date, a projection or a forecast of what those indicators might look like by the end of the year. So naturally, a lot of these we would expect to see, like the branch attendance is dramatically decreased. And again, that's just on an assumption as of today, based on the limited amount of knowledge we know about with respect to resuming regular business operations. So what we will be doing over the course of this year is monitoring these indicators as well as identifying new indicators. As an example, we've got a number of programs offered here, and you can see again the significant impact on the absence of physical attendance has had on that. So we will be looking at monitoring and reporting on those virtual programs that we've offered. Hopefully that will give us a better indication in terms of what we need to be doing on a go-forward basis. And then the next section is the financial forecast. And as cited in the report, salaries and benefits alone are going to be experiencing savings of about $325,000, again, based on the information we know today. And from that savings, you actually are incurring about $62,000 more in costs specifically related to COVID. So about $50,000 for reopening costs, and that's just to get us to the curbside, as well as some plexiglass installations and things like that we might need as we reintroduce more services that are going to require staff to be within close proximity of one another and unable to protect appropriately without that separation. And then the additional $12,000 there, 11,900 relates to additional janitorial costs from June to December. And that's just estimated at this point in time for the Ingersoll branch, because that information was available. And then you can see the other area of weakness or impact is the sale of bag tags. So that's been reduced by $10,000, but again, that will be offset by a similar amount in expenses, so not an overall impact on the bottom line. And again, some of those customers now are probably purchasing those bag tags online, so it's not like they're going without.
Yeah.
And again, just a precautionary or a notation there that these figures are subject to change. And as we said throughout this, anything we've experienced throughout this pandemic to date has been, it changes on a dime. So, you know, from one day to the next, it can look totally different. So we're prepared to make those adjustments as required. And then under the next steps and mitigation efforts, we will continue to monitor and respond to any of the provincial orders or directives as they come. So we have to immediately respond to those, particularly with the expeditious way that they are introduced and imposed. Similarly, we will, as I mentioned earlier, staff are just doing an amazing job at finding innovative ideas and solutions to delivering an ultimate library service under these circumstances. So we will continue to do that, and we will do so in a way we are well protected, both for our staff and for the public that we serve. And we'll also continue to keep the board apprised. We will try to maintain the same format so that it's familiar to everyone. And if there's anything we're missing or that you would like to hear more of in these reports, we're certainly looking for your feedback in that regard. Thank you.
Any comments or questions from the board for Lynn on this report? I guess then just a couple of notes for me. So first of all, like excellent report for us going forward to try and understand this. I mean, in a lot of ways, it just throws the 2020 budget completely out the window. But nevertheless, it's our job to try and understand, you know, what 2020 is going to look like relative to the budget that we did pass. And this goes a long way to helping us understand that. And outlines, again, you know, a path forward to continue to monitor that and look for opportunities. I would say, you know, Lynn's very careful speak around the way the orders come from the province and how quickly they come and how quickly we have to respond, just so that I'm sure that Lynn and Lisa probably know, but at the Oxford County Mayor CAO meetings that we're having every other day, we've discussed that how difficult it is for our staff to turn around operationally when the Premier makes an announcement that something is open the next day, and that's the first time that the staff who are going to be open hear about it. And we have passed that on to Southwestern Public Health as well, in that they're having regular meetings with the province, and the idea that it would be very helpful to our staff to know in advance of those announcements, because I know that especially now that we are going to be closer to open as a library, that there will be those phone calls saying, hey, the Premier just announced that we can now do this. And staff are going to be saying, well, thanks for letting me know. It's a very real problem, I think, because essentially the frustration then that residents are going to have is going to be directed at the staff who don't have the answer. So that's an ongoing conversation. I'm just want to make sure that everybody knows that is in fact ongoing, and we are attempting to get sort of 24 hours notice from the province before we're allowed to open things so that we can try and be ready. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Lynn on this?
Just one comment, and that's going back about a week. It kind of supports what you're saying. I think it was on a Friday afternoon when the Premier announced it Tuesday morning at 12:01 on a Tuesday morning, this and this is going to be open. And so there's absolutely no time frame whatsoever to be prepared for that, but yet they were going to be open. So we just have to bear with the times, I guess, and work with everybody and keep in mind that things do change, not daily, but hourly almost. And we can only get through this if we all work together. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Larry. So I guess if there aren't any others, then a question. I guess this question could. I'm not sure whether Lisa or Lynn wants to field this, but I think if I'm reading this report correctly, there still is the flexibility within the budget for you to operationally continue on. There's no need for formal changes to the budget as it was passed. That with the combination of forced changes and the resultant savings and things like that, operationally, you're able to keep going and reopen and deliver the plan that you outlined in the previous agenda item and all that.
I can
I would
respond
say
to
yes.
that. Sorry. Yes, through the chair, I would
Yeah,
just
go ahead, Lynn.
confirm that, yes, we will be monitoring the budget regularly and consistently, making sure that any purchases we make are well within the budget. But yes, making sure that we provide the best service level we possibly can within the approved budget, maybe going outside some of the areas, the line items within the budget specifically, but will not be exceeding by any stretch at this point in time. And again, we will be providing you updates on a monthly basis. So again, we will have these conversations on a very regular.
Thank you. Anyone else? The only other thing I would add really would be, and perhaps this may have more properly gone under the recovery plan, would be if you do need to make operational changes, Lisa, obviously outside of board, items that require board approval. If you could just let the board know by a quick email or something like that. So if we're fielding calls about, I heard we can do this at the library, that at the library, so that we can be at least in the loop, not necessarily that we're going to be the communicators of it, but so that if we get the calls, we know. Again, to David's point before about the communication of these changes, because they are going to happen so rapidly, and you guys are going to be reacting to new realities and all those kinds of things. That's the only other comment I had on this. If nobody has anything else, all those in favor? Opposed? None. That's carried. And unfinished business, we have none. Notice of motions, none. New business inquiries, comments. Anybody have any new business they want to introduce, or general inquiries or comments of Lisa or Lynn? Seeing none. Closed session, we have none. Consideration of matters arising from closed session, we have none. And a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Martin,
Seconded by Regina.
seconded by Smith. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.